let's see how we're doing. Gonna give Twitch a second to warm up, make sure we're all where we want and need to be. Change the title of the channel. Okay, so long-winded introduction while things get all cozy. We are revisiting the adapter and the interpreter pattern, which we implemented very lightly last semester. I'll stop putting that in quotes. But previously, we've gone over it very lightly, and now that we've introduced some new design patterns, it has brought to bear some necessary refactors. Created an application context and an action item. I'm sorry, did I say application? I meant action context and action item. This is going to be what we use to dig through the layers of our hive mind. And then when we come back out, we'll take the application context and then we'll transform that into a game response. Whereas previously, we had the game response burrowing down into the hive mind. And it really limits us a bit in terms of both what the definition of game response can be. It gets overloaded really easily. It gets confusing. And also what its responsibilities are. So too many concerns being handled by one thing is never good. Smudge says that he just committed a big chain for Mystical Puka. Take a look at. Mystical Puka is another streamer. And Smudge is quickly becoming the resident champion of GET and pull requests. So, congrats. Where do you find the time? That's my question. Alright, so I can tell you already that I don't like the name action item. 80% of everything is naming. I like action result. So, action context. We're starting to decide what's the minimum we can get away with all these little pieces and parts. So, the action context will get passed using our chain of responsibility pattern between all our various processing steps. And at the end, we'll have whatever the player was, whatever the target was, and then we'll have a chronological list of all the places this request has taken us. And then we can apply those as necessary. Okay, and then we've got the current game action, which is fine. So if we compare the action context against the game response, let's see what's missing or what's being repeated. So, in the game response, we've got the game request, the room content, the player, was successful, message, and the amount. Well, inside of our action result, we're taking care of quite a few of those. Taking care of the message, the amount, and was it successful. So let's just go and clear these three things out, because we don't need them. And player. Well, presumably, the player is going to be inside the room content, right? So, we might regret this. Let's go ahead and pull that out. And the request is something that was parsed from the console input. So, do we really need to return that back to the client? Like, why would it care? It's not mutable, or it is mutable, but we haven't changed it. Let's get rid of that. So, in theory, a really immature theory, is that we only need to return the room content. Ooh. And it would be nice to also have a list of action items so that we can see all that happened and then render it in order. If it's one thing, it's just, hey, I picked up an item, then I'll just display that. So, we refactored a bit yesterday, and it's always interesting to see. So we refactored, and now we're looking at another piece that we can slim up. This is actually a good step. I just took my Microsoft certification for Azure, and they actually had a refactoring question. One of the questions, I'm not going to give too much away, or else I'll get in trouble. But one of the questions actually had you performing a refactor, and it was surprising, right? It was like, hey, there's been a change in the architecture. What would you do to satisfy this refactor request? So, and it's just this stuff. So if you're not used to it, now you're going to be tested on it. So, what do we break? Well, quite a few things. So, let's just look around. Almost, there's a lot of stuff in the command handler and the base handler. So all these little helper methods that we had. So let's go ahead and refactor these guys. On a play result, this becomes an action result. Miss Kapuka's in the room. Miss Kapuka says, "What's up?" Not much. Not much at all. We are rocking and rolling first thing. It's exciting. So these are all things, they happen pretty easily. These little refactors. It's pretty easy. This is all part of the practice. Dan G throws up a high five. Right back at you, Dan G. Am I saying that right, Dan G? I hope so. Dan G requests the highest of fives. Okay. And there's really no need here to pass in the request. And part of this refactor is just getting with the idea of being consistent, and like Smudge said the other day, getting to a place of solid principles so that little things that help you when you context switch don't get in the way, right? So we wouldn't expect to see a request object this deep, and so when we see it, it automatically cues off. It's some small part in the back of our brain. Why are we seeing this? What's its meaning? And if you're new to the code, all those little things are just going to slow you down when you're trying to onboard yourself to a new project. So we want everything to be as lean and consistent as possible, and this is getting there. 36, that feels better already. Alright, so this guy, yeah, there is no, so we're going to change around. Let's go to the base handler. And we're not backing that up with an interface that has to, so Danji asks, off topic, what's your take on the Oracle versus Google case. I don't know anything about that, actually. I don't follow Google as closely as I used to. And I certainly don't follow Oracle as closely as I used to. But catch me up. What is the Oracle versus? Hit me with a link. What is that all about? As long as we're a little off topic, and we are refactoring, and we say to ourselves, like, what's the point of all this? And I'm always harping on the idea of a personal software process. So, I came across this. Independ is a static code analyzer. Pretty good link here. And they had a really good way of labeling these things. They had like the zone of pain. And I really like this, right? So it analyzes your code and it tells you, hey, if things are so up here in the zone of uselessness, it looks at your code and it says, hey, if a method is highly abstract and highly extensible, but it's not being used anywhere, then it's useless, right? That's the one extreme. And then the other extreme is the zone of pain, where things can't be extended and they're being relied upon very heavily. And so this isn't like an endorsement of this tool because I've never used it, but I have been looking at static code analyzers recently. You know, FXCop is great now; it's baked into Visual Studio, but I still prefer to, compose my own rules and then run it as part of the build process. So it's always fun, and it's nice to have that kind of sanity check. And so I just thought this was really neat, and just a good way of kind of keeping your mind like this is where you want to be, the center channel, where things aren't abstracted out for no reason to the point where they're not being used anywhere. It's like this, they call it like architectural astronauting. And at the same time, that they're not so coupled and just tightly bound that making any kind of change is going to be painful. And my personal chart, like the one that I'm working on, so I'm writing kind of like my own little guide, just for myself really, but I'll let everybody else use it. So, if our product was on this chart, right, and assuming that this is the very linear growth that we've been following, so every week we've been adding more features, more complexity to the application, and we hit this point where internally we decide that we really need to refactor. We really need to like look at the whole thing and really lower the technical debt associated with it. Because when we get into this space that we saw, 2 weeks ago, you start getting scope creep, mystery bugs. The cost of making simple changes is really expensive. And then when you cross this threshold of software rot, we get to a place of unmaintainability, where making a simple change costs nearly as much as maybe a whole previous phase did. So we definitely hit this point, I think, when we started this new semester. And so we did a lot of refactoring. And there's a cost to that. There's a reason why people avoid it, because we made a small change and we created like 200 new errors in the code. And so it takes time to really parse through. We spent whole days going through and making it a better application. And so part of your personal software process, and speaking to the people that are getting started in the industry or looking at their first or second jobs, part of your personal software process is to have a way to say, I made this refactor change and it kept me out of this scary place. Even if, and especially if, the company you work for isn't providing you with the tools and mechanisms to answer these questions for you. You want to be able to come back after a year and say, hey, look, I ran my own numbers and I made the call to refactor here. And as a result, it lowered the number of bugs, it lowered the average task completion time, it helped out in further sprints, it added concurrency, cohesiveness, all these great things. To be able to say that for yourself. So, that's it, right? So that's kind of if there's a sage lesson to be derived from this, or a method to the madness, it's we're in here doing all this as an exercise to that end. Okay, so let's get our mind back in the game. So it looks like a lot of our stuff right now let's do everything but the handlers. Let's look at some old code, like in the render. So we actually want to take in here, I would tell the game response, but this is probably going to be display commands. We got draw room. Yes, yes, yes. Hang on. And our render strategy. So they don't really care in right here if the response was successful. We assume it's going to be regardless. We assume now, instead of the whole game response being successful or failing, we assume now that the action results, the individual action results, are going to have their own success or failures. And so we pulled out player. So now we need to get that player back. Oh, well, actually we don't. So does the player instance have enough knowledge of itself to find itself in the room content? That is the question. So let's leave that broken for a second. We draw the room, and then we're going to do for each var action results in game response dot action items. So this is going to be, these are all the commands that we got. So this is actually pretty cool. Smudge says that we really need to take a look at like how the player and room content are related, and I completely agree. So I'm leaving this "I'm too scared to deal with this right now" squiggly line up there, and let's work around that and knock out some low-hanging fruit. So what's really cool about this now is that little bit of ugliness notwithstanding, we have the ability to say, okay, let's draw the room that we're in. Let's then loop through all of the result statements we have, right? So they could be anything from picks up item to attacks, and then a secondary attack that happens. All these things just happen, you know, in this stream that came back. Like, so we want to be able to display that. And then when we say display command, we want to pass in that action result. So now let's go to display command and change this guy. Because again, you can see how in a lot of these places we're passing back these really heavy objects. And now we can check, hey, if the action result, this particular action result, wasn't successful, then do something. This feels redundant. Why did we draw the room content here? We already drew it. So I don't want to draw the room there. but I do want to do the game action message, or the, I'm sorry, the action result message. Okay. Now let's look at this guy. Alright, so we got another place to Alright, so we do want this. We just want it to be done a little bit differently. So in this case, we got the server's processing this, and we're doing a little try-catch block here. So we got the new game response. I'm sorry, I just read in chat that Smudge says, I'm tempted to start streaming again with a focus on looking at other people's code and teaching how to improve and why. Yes. That would be such a great addition to the whole ecosystem. I encourage you with all of my power to do that. That'd be amazing. Can you hear me, Smudge? Do it. Do it, do it, do it. Alright, and so then in game response, we want to make sure that we have a new list of action results. Oops, hang on. This is going to be messy and my IntelliSense isn't going to help me. There we go. Then we want to do, let's go and just do this action result equals new action result. We don't need the request. Alright, so this is how it looks right now, kind of broken up. We do a game response dot action items dot add action result. Cool. So our console process strategy, that being on the server, its job is to take a request, to play around with it, and then return back a game response. So there's not much refactoring to happen here. This is our iterator, that we might come back to that. Alright, down to 27. And it looks like we're getting close to them all being inside of the handler. Oh yeah, that's our grr. Hang on. Sorry, I just need to back up for a second and see what. Oh. So this is our really lame attempt to handle this login condition. But, which just means that we won't have a player instance. But this should probably be solved and maybe even go away. Depending on how we refactor this. So let's maybe leave this a little bit of dust on it for a second. Actually, let's just think about it. So I think that we can do this. If we have a player, then it's still kind of a poor man's approach to handling our login stuff on the client side. But let's just say, hey, if the player instance is not null, then we can draw the room, we can do whatever we need to. And then if it is null, we just need to display the command or commands. So we're going to do the same thing. So this little guy, we're going to do a little preemptive on that guy. We display action items. We're going to take in a list of action results. Call that action items. Make that void. We're going to copy this guy, throw that there. Do that. And then where that was, go ahead and do display action items, and then we will do game response dot action items, and then we'll do the same thing here. Cleaner, cleaner, cleaner already. And here we got the same problem down here where we're getting the player from the game response, and we need to make sure we have a way to get it out of the room content. But as Smudge said, it's tightly coupled in the places we probably don't want it to be. But we're definitely achieving the goal of having the request and response ecosystems where you'd expect them, right? Whether it's part of the TCP server-client relationship or as part of the game itself, unboxing those objects and doing something with it. They're happening in the same places at this kind of these endpoints, and not happening any deeper than they need to. So if you see them, you should have some sort of kind of mental map of where you are. If you see a request or response, you know you're close to an endpoint or a node in the application that's either talking to or being taught or is being spoken to. So that should be helpful. I think this is redundant. This is where Control Z becomes your friend later on, because you're like, oh, well, I shouldn't have deleted that, but we'll see. Okay. So let's go to our base handler. Don't really see that, but and what we need to decide here is we have an abstract class that wants to give back a game response, and I believe what we want that to be is an action context, and we want it to take in an action context. So we take and we give and we take and we give this action context all the livelong day. And same thing here. I'm pretty sure Smudge is talking to me. So it's starting to look a lot like Owen. That is good. Still a bit intermingled, but we'll get there. We will get there. We will. And just like Microsoft, we definitely want to go down the approach of let the best ideas bubble up and then just adopt those, right? Understand them and adopt them. So if you can't beat them, join them. And yeah, Owen. Okay, so we want to get back this action request from handle request. We want to pass in that same action request. Nothing crazy there. Then we want to pass in this guy, else return it. Cool. Looks better. Looks better already. Oh, Voila, 7 errors. Can you believe it? Yeah, so Smudge says something I would never fathom 5 years ago. Let's be more like Microsoft. Yeah, they've really turned a corner. And one of the warm blanket. This is my 2 cents, right? My little soapbox. The warm blanket of Microsoft was always they would forage, right, for the best ingredients or the best approaches, the best whatever. They do all that for you, and then all you had to do was be a good little soldier and just not ask too many questions. Not ask what's happening behind the scenes. Not ask how that click handler is actually wired up in a form, right? Just do as you're told. And now they're really kind of going out into the industry and saying, let's just do the smart thing. Let's not push our agenda, which is nice because they're still keeping the warm blanket feeling, right? So Visual Studio 2015, you can still play the waiting game. You can say, okay, when it ends up in 2015 in Visual Studio, then I'll use it. Or if it ends up in Visual Code, then I'll use it. That used to mean that you had a warm blanket, but you also remained ignorant. Now that means that you get kind of the best of what's happening out in the world in a ecosystem that's going to hold your hand a little bit. Hang on. There's some naysayers. I think there's one naysayer. Mystical Puka, you don't like Microsoft? That's what pays the bills. Alright. Because chat's really into this, and because I think it's really exciting, I'm going to leave this for a second, and I'm going to show just a few things that are really exciting that are happening right now in the space, right? So let's look at Edge.js. Let me see if I can paint a picture here, because if people are discussing it, then if you're watching this video, you're probably the same question. So you're probably asking yourself, if you care about my opinion, which you may or may not, but if you care about an extra opinion, let's take a look. So Edge.js is a project that allows you to run .NET code in line with Node.js. So it kind of builds on the whole idea of Node.js that you could actually do a daughter process from within, but it really wraps it very neatly. So here's your first thing, right? So now that .NET is truly cross-platform, you can now package Node.js that works seamlessly right alongside of .NET. So you can ship your Node.js code with your C# DLLs and everything's happy. This is pretty awesome because you can debug it as well. Yeah, so check. It's a new level of loveliness. So this by itself would be neat, but then you take out the Electron framework. So the Electron framework is what Atom.io, the GitHub editor, and Visual Studio Code are built on top of. So now, if you think about Edge.js and Electron, now you can write HTML, CSS, and JavaScript as a cross-platform desktop application or anything, and have it call your C# code inline. It really gets you to a place where you are writing one piece of code, and it gets you to phone, desktop, tablet, Xbox, anything that's running Windows 10. You're guaranteed a place there as a first-class citizen. So that's exciting. The other exciting thing, and I could go on for hours about this, the Windows IoT Core. So this is the guy that they want to ship and put on things like the Raspberry Pi 2. So they're also working on being able to make Node.js a first-class citizen here, so that your universal applications that you write for every platform can call Node.js. So it really is the same application you wrote for the web is now being placed on this this Raspberry Pi. And you can, and the goal, if I understand it correctly, is to be able to make these single-use appliances. So you got this little $35 board, and all it does is boot up and run your app, right? So it becomes a true appliance. So that to me is actually really, really neat, especially if you look at what's happened in the Raspberry Pi space as far as things like Rasplex, right? Which is like this. So all you're doing is saying, hey, my Raspberry Pi is just going to do this one thing. It's just going to run Plex for me. And it's going to do it really, really well for $35. So now you have that ability as a C# developer, as a .NET developer, to write this application that can run everywhere, and that can also be placed onto a little appliance as a single-use device. Okay, so that is why I am pretty excited about the direction Microsoft is going, because it's making this ecosystem possible. Don't get me started on Continuum for the Windows Phone, because that's my other kind of gives me goosebumps. Okay, so back to this guy. Back to the fun stuff, because we are having fun now. Action context. Action context. Oops. Why are you mad? Handle request. Yes. Oh. We no longer need this guy that we threw in there just for giggles. And we're not returning action context yet. Okay. All the red's making sense to me now. So here we're doing more of a login stuff. And this is a place where we are coupled to get the player name, or just the player. And so we're saying if the action is equal to login, hang on, just make sure we're not, I think we're good. returning before? Control Z. Yeah, we talked about this before, about the squigglies or not to squiggle. This is definitely where having no squiggles makes it really hard to read. Like, it's no squiggles here, no squiggles, and then squiggles. Blog. All right, so let's change that. All right, so if the action context equals login, we really just want to bail out. We don't really care. Oh, there we go. Man, my eyes were not helping me out with that one. So here's the point, like in the command handler, we're doing some stuff like get player by name, return game response. I don't think we know or really care about. If the action equals login, just get out of here. So, get player by name, or so you can get the room. Get room by player name. So, as we're getting deeper into this, and we make sure I'm doing the right thing. Let's create a new handler, because we're asking this command handler to do some things that it really shouldn't have to do. So let's go into our core. It's our game engine. Oh, I'm in common. Domain logic, core, game engine, handlers. Let's go to new item. So we have an off handler, we have a command handler, we've got a finalize handler. Let's do a dependency handler. I'm going to do this as a public class. As much as see they link both ways. They really do. Let's do that. Open the missing members. We'll leave that for just a second as we go into the hive mind, and we're going to show kind of the power of the chain of responsibility, because now we have a new handler and we know where we want it to go. Let's go to hive mind. Let's go ahead and new this guy up. Var dependency handler equals new dependency handler, and then set the successor as a dependency handler. And then for the dependency handler, we'll set the successor as the command handler. Right? So, we've just used the chain of responsibility to extend out the functionality of the game, of the hive mind. And as the beauty of the architecture and the design patterns, we can do that without actually having to write any code. We can just do the architecture bit first, leave these third not implemented in there, and then see how it affects the rest of the architecture. Which is like the happy part about using design patterns, is once you get really comfortable, you can then architect out your system without having to commit to too much business logic. You can say, how is this all going to fit together? Can I write this skeletal system without having to put too much, horrid red text in there, or too many placeholders. So, boop, 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 boop. That looks good. Gonna leave that alone for a second. Let's come back over. Let's close this. Command handler. So the command handler should not care about getting the room. It should already have the room as part of the, I'm going to assume, the action context. That's what I'm hoping for here. We made it a helper method inside of the base handler because that made the most sense at the time. But we're going to start challenging these things. And this is where a lot of the fun comes in, because we saw this before when we refactored, that this guy, this command handler, was the source of a lot of our pain, because it was just doing so much, and it's still doing a lot. So look at our base handler. We've got this, which is good. It is. We could run into issues that are really too far flung to worry about. So the one of the concerns would be if you don't get the room at like just before you need it, the information could be stale, right? So that's a concern. So there's a concern for doing it just in time, for saying right before I need the room, I'm going to grab it, I'm going to do some stuff, I'm going to pass it back, right? So that would be a justification for leaving this here. However, doing this doesn't fix that problem, right? It's really, you're really putting it in, you're crossing your fingers. It doesn't in a sophisticated or complete way tackle that issue of concurrency. So we're going to take it out. We do need a way to get the room. Right? Let's refactor around that. We're refactoring around a lot of stuff right now just because we're lazy. And then here, needless. We're saying if it doesn't equal game action. Well, we already said if it equals game action, bounce out. Let's get rid of this if statement. Okay. So, in our action context, just to kind of show that we have the things we need to replace, we've got the player, which replaces the sender. And this out of play result, we no longer need to pass in the request. We're just passing in the player. Whoa, hang on. This guy should not care. Oh, well then. That's fine. Hang on, let's just fix this real quick. Easy there, Emulsion. Yes? Oh, I see. Ah, yes. So that should not have cared. But we need new up. So this is the joy, right? So instead of returning back these big things, like the game response, we're going to add this. Throw some parens or some curly braces around that. And return action context. Okay. Let's just go through. We're running out of time here so quickly. But let's go ahead and do some real fast refactoring. So just as a point, it just looks and feels better. Instead of saying game response dot request dot sender dot execute action, we're saying, hey, action context dot player. So I'm ignoring the room key. Anything where we need to have the room. We're just going to ignore that for just a real quick second. Okay, so we need to pull that out. Do that. Okay, so this is getting where we want to go as far as being able to, at some point, refactor all of this into something very streamlined and very neat and orderly. And we talked about it before of kind of leaving your dirty laundry out until you can see where everything's going to rest and lay. And then when you can see enough of that, then go ahead and optimize and refactor. Otherwise, if we had optimized all of this out previously, we'd probably be having to unravel a lot of really optimized code to make these changes. Or maybe not, but that's the situation we're trying to avoid. Okay. So we see here that for these three, we're executing the action. Was keeping that in mind. I was putting that in the back of my brain. This is going to help me to think about how this will eventually be a nice, prettier piece of code. all this copy pasta is 100% where bugs are introduced. There are face slapping moments at every opportunity here. Closer, closer. Okay. I like it, I like it, I like it. Nope. Need to get rid of this. And that. Okay, we saw something very similar when we refactored a few other places where we get to this point, this kind of refining point, where we can say, wow, the only thing that's really different... Oh, there we go, get rid of this guy. And that guy. So the only thing we have that's different here between these four primary commands are restore health, take damage, repair, and negotiate. So what this suggests is that, if nothing else, the four base commands could be someplace else, someplace leaner, right? Because they can really benefit from having a very optimized pipeline because they're so similar. So as far as this thing's less than 100 lines of code, but it's good to be thinking this way, that hey, even 100 lines of code, we can make this better. Don't wait for the classic, oh, my class is 300 lines, so now I have to refactor. No, sir. No, sir. Okay. Oh, so let's go ahead and do a little refactor here. Dot message equals action context dot target dot get. I'm sorry, this description. Action result dot was successful is equal to true. Action result. Oh, that's it. Just the description. Was it true? And the request, which we don't need anymore. So look how much simpler that is. It's going to be the same thing for this guy. There's more dependencies being cleaned up, and these things were everywhere. Is it Gunnarin or Gunarin? It says, there aren't many C# programmers on Twitch, so I'm glad I found this channel. Man, I've been kind of ignoring chat because Mystical Puka and Smudge have been doing such a good job of, you know, I don't know what, keeping the peace? No, that's not right. Just a good job, right? The chat's in good hands, so I haven't really looked over it too often. Now let's see, somebody else as well. FH Mitch, welcome to you as well. I'll do a quick little, hey, welcome guys at the end and point you to some resources and how to get in touch with me. Definitely want to keep track of everybody. Okay, so we're getting rid of red squigglies. We're refactoring. Just pulling things out left and right. Okay. Oops, not action result. Action context. So, at the end of every one of these, we definitely do want to add the action result. Make sure we're doing that. And then at the very end, we are going to return the action context. So we've done everything we want to here as far as the command. We're taking in action context. We're saying, hey, what was the command they wanted to have executed? And then we're passing it to the right place. We're checking it. We're double checking it. We're doing whatever we need to. So the one thing that we want to tackle is this idea of the room content. So now we've got this minty fresh dependency handler, where this is where we really want to handle all those dependencies. We want to make sure, if we go back to our chain of responsibility pattern and getting everything in the right place and making sure that's really a pattern that we're taking advantage of. Let's go back into our core, into our hive mind. Right, so now we've got these four steps in our chain of responsibility. We've got our authentication or authorization, dependency handler, command handler, and finalizer. So once our auth handler is done, it's going to pass its action context to the dependency handler. Once the dependencies handler is done, it's going to pass that action context to the command handler. Then once the command handler is done, it's going to pass it to the finalize handler, right? And so then once we have, at the very end of this, we've got this action context. It's going to be stuffed full of messages and results, all date time stamped, hopefully. So what we're looking at here is when we go to the auth handler, we want to make sure that we have a player. And if we don't have a player, we're going to keep them in this loop of logging in, right? Then once we have a player, we want to make sure we have everything we need to complete our future steps. So that means inside of this, we probably need a public room content. Look at that, room collection. Okay, so. And then we come back into our command handler, and then we say, okay, this guy shouldn't be here. Go to dependency handler, and we say action context dot room is equal to get room by player.name. What are you croaking about? Oh. Boom. Alright, so, and then we're going to look at our other finalize handler, for example. Oh, we got to fix that guy. Holy tornados. I don't know what that word is. Tornados. I do not claim to know what that is. I just opened my mouth and a sound came out. All right, so this is actually really cool because now we've got a dedicated place to do our dependency resolution. So if we ever get that dreaded null exception or saying, hey, oh, the player wasn't loaded, we know we always come back here. This automatically makes our bugs easier to fix, our logic easier to extend. We're doing good. Okay, so let's come back into our command handler, and now we have the room. We can operate with some confidence. We can say, I have the action context, and the action context has promised me that it's going to have a room. And if the action context doesn't have a room, it's not my problem as the command handler. That's the dependency handler's job. So I want to go there to fix it. I never want to put stuff in here that isn't its responsibility, which is, if we come full circle, the idea behind this single responsibility pattern. We keep stripping out this extra fat, putting it where it needs to go, and it makes everything we want to do much, much easier. Oops. Oh. So let's go ahead and put this here. Nope, do the same thing. That's cool. I like that where it was. So let's go ahead and follow this convention of how we're handling all of these kind of pre-checks. Oh. Cool. What? Yes. Oh, look at that. Man, I'm trying to get ahead of myself. I see the clock going over time, and I'm all like, oh, I gotta rush. And make silly mistakes. Mystical Puka says, I'm heading home now. Because you're going to get back. It was great to see the stream, and thanks for all the help and awesomeness. Be well, Mystical Puka. I hope to see you again in the future, and good luck. Boom, look at this. It's like when you help yourself, it just feels good. Look at it. Just knowing it's coming from the right place just makes it just a joy to even make the call. Oops. All right, so that all looks good. Well, for this pass, all right, we're definitely going to spend a lot more time here, breaking all this out into appropriate places. Okay. 5 errors. Cool. So now we're in the auth handler. Whoa, look at this. That all went weird. Alright, sorry for being so quiet, but I think it's pretty obvious what we're doing. Just kind of wrapping things up with this refactor. We didn't look too much at the interpreter pattern, and we've got quite a bit that we can still focus on with these two patterns. And so I wonder if I don't extend it till next week. I'm just kind of to apologize for the misnomer. I said adapter and interpreter, and we've really only done the adapter. So maybe next week we'll do the interpreter. Now that we're in the finalized handler, the last step of the chain of responsibility, we want to do things like check state, make sure the person's not dead, which they could be, and if they are, we want to do some other things. Alright, so now we've gotten ourselves all the way back to the beginning where we're in our hive mind. And we dump this action context into our pipe, right? And we want to make sure that at the very least, we're setting up our player as a new player. We just need to give it a name. And then we want to set up our context.target is equal to new, it's not player, it's going to be a new, let's see what is tough. Request.target. So I guess we could just do this, right? Instead of going to the whole new player thing, it's already been newed up for us at some point. It does feel better. Okay, now ReSharper wants to do an object initializer. I think we use it enough to really kind of be able to see its worth. Okay. So, now our hive mind is super lean. All it's doing is a request comes in, we create a new action context for that, then we create a new game response to be used later, and then now that we get our action context back from our chain of responsibility, we can take our response dot action items is equal to action context dot action items response dot room content is equal to action context dot room. All right, so send the action context through the chain of responsibility. Build our response. And then for the last step, we go ahead and push that response onto our response stack, and then return it back out. Back to this guy. So now we're in render, right? This was the thing we avoided. So in the long ago, we were like, we don't have a way to fix this, and just by doing what we do's, we were able to. So we got this room content, and we need to be able to get the player out of this, which is going to be in the game objects. So we go into our draw room. There's probably another chance for a little bit of refactoring. So we got this guy. We get all our players. So I'm going to steal this. So we already know that the player one instance that we have is not equal to null. So we have a player. What we want to do is we want to get the refresh player out of our response. So we're going to go to our game response and the game objects. Bear with me. We're going to bring in our link enumerable so we can do this. And then take it easy, Mystical Poka. Mystical Poka requests the highest of all high fives, and I give him one. Okay, so this is a bit dense here that we're going to get the player. We'll leave that for now. Smudge says I have created intention to do that for you. I bet you have too. I bet you have. If you can find it before I have to wrap this up, let me know. I'll go ahead and put that in instead. Like, what's it extending off of? I guess that's the question. Just now I realized how much I really enjoy asking you that question. You know, right? Like a little bit of collaboration, a little bit of, hey, give me a little signature that I can call to make my life easier. Feels good. Feels like a team. So getting ready to wrap up, but we touched on quite a bit tonight as far as the refactoring, which was definitely the idea. We didn't get to the iterator, so I'm going to push it off to next week. Do some more refactoring behind the scenes, but we definitely saw the hive mind being able to take advantage and extend the chain of responsibility just dynamically, and it became immediately helpful because we now have a new place to kind of keep a lot of this logic as far as resolving dependencies and making sure that the other steps in the chain of responsibility have what they need. And then we did a lot of work to clean up the command handler to get it so that all those game requests and responses weren't cluttering our just our mindset when we're looking at the deep nested hive mind activities. And by doing that, by taking that adapter pattern and saying where does it logically fit, let's go ahead and define it as a real pattern, as a real piece of architecture, and clean up all the places it doesn't belong. By doing that, we just started cutting out cruft left and right. So, looks cleaner, looks meaner. I like it. Everything builds. I'll just make sure the game starts. But before next week, for sure, I'll go in and just make sure we're at a good place to actually look at the iterator. Because it's going to be really fun. But the idea there is that we want to be able to turn that bit of input into an expression. And the expression is what gets passed forward. Not just a string anymore. We definitely want to put it through the grinder. I think that's going to be a lot of fun. Where am I? Oh, there we are. So our server stands up and starts listening on a port. And our client stands up, and you see these side by side. You see that a client connected on this port. It asks us to log in. We say, my name is Gary. Oh no. And we get the dreaded object object. Well then, let's fix that real fast. Yeah. Oh, look at that. So, we have an action result here, and we do all the things properly. We never actually add that action result to the context. Shame, shame, shame. But this still shouldn't be null here. So let's go ahead and debug there. Let's go ahead and do this. Action context dot action items dot add action result. Right, so we should get that now. Let's go ahead and put a debug point there. Smudge says he might have changed it to start both at once. Let's try that. No. Probably his use setting. Take a look at that in a second, but let's go ahead and try this real fast. I made this promise that I'd keep these like short and to the point, these videos, but it gets to be so much fun. You don't want to stop. Okay, so we got our login. We're typing in Gary. We come here. We do get a player. There's a carpenter, right? So that comes through perfectly. Let's go ahead and hit F10. Oh. So, someplace on our dependency chain where we didn't set something like we should. Oh, hang on. So, hang on. Oh, look at that. We're learning things. So, Smudge, every day I'm learning. To be able to set the multiple products to startup, I want to do server and client. And I want to make sure the client starts, I'm sorry, the server starts before the client. Alright, let's see if that works. And let's just try to step through a few times and see if we can't figure out where all of our, boom, nice. So let's go ahead and step through and see if we can't figure out where all of our, where stuff is breaking. Wait a minute. Is it really that early? Is it going to be that simple? Holy Toledos. Man, this could be the easiest bug in all history. We barely have to work for this one. Yeah. Action items is null. Incredible. Man. Egg on face. So, where do we want to new up action items? In theory, it'd be in the hive mind, but right here. Let's go ahead and just throw on this. Action items equals new list of action results. That looks good. And then we also want to do the current game action. I don't know if we want to do it in the dependency handler because we need the action items like from the very beginning. And we'd also left off the, let's move this down a little bit. We also left the current action. So, there we go. So we're adding a little more meat to our execute method, but we're still not doing anything too crazy. Oh, we gotta serialize all the things. Because every day I'm serializing. That doesn't work. I apologize. I apologize immediately. That was a horrible idea. And then in this guy, boom, serialize all the things. I'm not sending back the context. We're going to serialize just in case. Now that could be needless. Let's make sure we have to serialize it before we serialize it. Am I right? Oh. So we get a response back, but it doesn't trust. It's like, hey, because this guy's null. We created a little infinite loop for ourselves. So, here we need to say, if the singleton for player is null, but the response dot game response dot, oh no, we already got the player. Ooh, look at this. This is going to be a key reason why I need to refactor this guy, because we can't do first here anymore because first could bomb out. So we need to do first or default. So first default is going to say, hey, give me back the player if you can find it, otherwise give me null. So if the player instance, the current player that we have, isn't null, it means that we've already logged in. So you want to say, if the current player instance is not null, then go ahead and do your things. Otherwise, if the instance is null, so we are logging in or getting a login response, we want to say if the player instance is null and the player is not null, there's some funky logic in there. Hang on. Oh yeah, look at that. You're absolutely right. Sorry, Smudge is looking about out on my. Because that's what I mean. Sorry, my brain is rapidly shutting down. So make a quick little change. So here let's think about what we're doing. We're gonna say, let's just go and think it out. So we already have a logged in player, which means we already have a game instance, so we're going to do these things, which is label, right? Then we assume a login command is coming back. Oh, I see what you're saying, Smudge. Thank you. My brain really is shutting down. That is much prettier. Okay. So, here's where I think. You're welcome, Smudge. Alright, so I'm sorry. So we want to say if the current player is not null, meaning we already logged in, or the player coming back is not null. In either case, we want to go ahead and assign the current instance to this refresh player and draw the room and display the action items. And we're saved here by this new action context, because if we need to greet the player, it should be in this list of action items. And then here, it's going to fall through. Things should be good. We're going to beef this up a little bit, but so we're either already logged in and performing a subsequent action, or we just logged in and have a player and presumably some welcome thing or whatever. Let's do that actually, right? Action result dot message equals welcome back. Alright, let's start pounding this thing. Oh, of course. Because this guy could be null. We are silly people. This might require a bit more thinking about how we handle the login stuff, but oh, yeah. Once again, Smudge is right. We're gonna walk ourselves into some sort of logic trap here. Hang on, thinking. How do I want to handle it? Oh. No, because I still need to get the room content. And that's all I really have. So I could put the name in the request. So this is gonna be a good test of the singleton, right? So we're looking at the render strategy. It might be a cheap place to do it, but Smudge says orders return the iPlayer on the response. I think that kind of, it's not horrible. I think it takes us in a backwards direction from where we needed to be. I agree. However, I think, bear with me, I think putting it here is going to really help us to tackle the iterator pattern next week. I think. It's going to be dirty and wrought with problems, but if I am thinking about this... Oh. Nah, you're absolutely right. Your Smudge in chat is right. And I guess I'm also right. So the idea is that this is going to be a dirty place to do it. We're going to run into some other issues, but those issues we run into should put us right in line with the iterator pattern, where we're dealing with the exact problem, right? We're parsing these things into these expressions. So, because the danger here is that suddenly, if I put in a bunch of gobbledygook here, then that's going to be the player name. So I definitely want to, I got to figure that out. Anywho, it works. So I type in Gary, I get my room, I get my messages, welcome back is the only message, and it displays a command line. So everything works. We're rounding the corner on 2 hours here, but I think we did a lot of good work. It's really hard to stop streaming when you're having fun. So, this feels good. If you've been following along for the last, almost 10 weeks now, I think almost 10 weeks, maybe more. Following along, we've done a lot of good stuff, and we're definitely upping the ante as far as how much we're doing per stream in terms of complexity. But let me go ahead and check this in, and then next week we're going to do the iterated pattern, and what did I call this thing? Yeah, we'll do that. Day 2. I shouldn't leave anything out. Once again, mad thanks and props go out to Smudge for tidying up our git ignore and all that good stuff. So you're definitely going to be rewarded for sticking through this video, because you would have seen a lot of good refactoring and really hardening of some of the design patterns we've gone over. So I'm going to start wrapping things up here, and then as usual give my one last goodbye. But I wanted to thank the new people for hanging out. I've already forgotten your names. I know Dan G is a pretty new one from just last week. Is that right? And then a few other folks. So, you can find me on Reddit via Watch People Code. But my Reddit name is that. I just threw it in the chat. So, you can find me there. You can ask me questions. Look down in the channel for my archived videos, and then also on YouTube. A few links for just getting started. Reach out to me on Reddit if you have any questions whatsoever, and hopefully you can stick around long enough, because in a few weeks we hope to start over again. We hope to start with a new project with a factory pattern, kind of assuming you only know the bare minimum, and then we're going to build from there. So, if you're just checking in now and you're like, man, this is crazy, the hope is to get to a point where you can get from knowing almost barely what a class is, just getting through the I can start a project, I can run a console app, and that's it, to where we are now and really understand each step of the way. And we're also hoping that we can do the GitHub stuff, so you can go back and pull down commits, watch videos, and even if you aren't checking every week live, you can still run through the videos and the code and see what happens, and kind of ask me questions from there as well. So definitely check it out. Love to hear from you. And next week we're going to go to the iterative pattern and more of what we've done here tonight. And I think we're at a point now where we shouldn't be introducing too much new stuff. So we don't have to be worried about your mind being blown, because we'll just be saying, oh, and we're just going to make the adapter pattern cleaner. We're going to clean up this part, remove this cruft. So what you see here is what you get so far. All right. I'll let the Twitch stream catch up, but I just want to say thanks everyone for hanging out, and I'll see you next week.